You think the number one reason people go out is people relapse, people fail in recovery? Like, what do you think?
I think it's multifaceted.
Yeah.
People aren't having a good time. They're not enjoying themselves. They haven't found meaning and purpose in their life. They haven't found a community that they're a part of. There might be mental health issues, depression, anxiety, possibly thought disorders. Could be finances, financial obligations that they can't meet, and the stressors are overwhelming for them. They just want to get a little bit of relief. Every time I relapsed on cigarettes, I just want to drag. I just want to drag. And I have to say to myself, well, you don't smoke cigarettes, so why do you want to drag?
Yeah.
And I say, what's the driver? What's the feeling under that drag? Because I know I'll have a drag and I'll be buying a carton within a week.
Same.
Welcome to Recovering Out Loud podcast with your hosts, Anthony and Caleb. In this podcast, our intention is to help the still suffering addict or alcoholic and provide you, the listener, with our experience, strengths, and hope. We share real, raw stories of healing, hope, and breaking free. The opinions expressed here are those of the individuals and not any organization. Please help support the channel by following and rating the show. This is the best kind of donation we could receive. So grab a seat, take a deep breath, and let's get loud about healing together.
After that is go use.
Yeah. Do some more controlled drinking, right?
It won't be a struggle,
Yeah.
right? Until it is.
Okay. Well, listen, Jay, I appreciate you, man. Thanks for coming down.
Oh, you're welcome.
I know Caleb's not here right now. He's working hard and he couldn't get out, but I know he wanted to be here and he texted me and said, I wish I could be here. And we're having a lot of fun doing this, which is really cool, right? Like I didn't think, I don't know, it's coming easy, right?
Yeah.
And it seems like something that I was, I don't want to say meant to do, but something that I enjoy doing and it doesn't feel like work, right? So why don't you tell me a little bit about JP? Who is JP? How did you get into, addiction? What you were like? What kind of happened, and what you're like now? In a brief way, I guess.
Okay,
Yeah.
great. Well, first I want to say thanks for having me down. I really appreciate it. I really admire what you and Caleb are doing down here, and I think it's wonderful. Finding a passion and some meaning in life these days.
Yeah.
It can be difficult and challenging.
Yeah.
So what
you.
was I like? What am I like? And where am I going?
Yeah. What do you like
Kind of
today?
thing.
Yeah.
I came into using drugs like anyone else. Thought that I found kind of a magic cure during my late adolescence, when everybody's struggling for independence, but we end up all being pretty much the same clothes, same haircuts. And I think, just smoking dope in high school was kind of a bit of sense of a rebellion. I'm doing something, that individuates me or highlights my independence and autonomy, and I think that kind of carried on to, when pot wasn't enough and this wasn't enough, that wasn't enough, just carried on to more like pills and powders and things like that. I had a travel agency when I was young, and that opened up, the trade routes. And that's a whole other podcast, I guess. But needless to say, that ended up with a long-term government vacation. And when I got out of that, I swore I'd never go back to the way I was. I still wanted to use recreationally. And I think once somebody gets into the dependency stage, recreational use is only a myth, for most of us. I don't know. Maybe some people can have the odd beers here and there, or the odd non-habit forming herb or something.
Yeah.
But for me, it just led me back to the pills and the powders. And life crashed in on me, and I think my probation officer called me. No, he told me, don't come in. I'll just issue a warrant for your arrest.
Wow.
My parole officer, actually. My parents, I walked into their room in the middle of the night. My dad had told me, and the next morning he said, you came into our room at 2 a.m, And I said, oh no. And he said, you turned on the lights and we asked you what you were doing. You weren't wearing any clothes. And we asked you what you were doing and you said you were waiting for the parade. And he said, if you're back on that stuff again, like just get out of here. Don't call us anymore. We've done what we can. We can't help you anymore. And I kind of knew that was it. I couldn't, I couldn't go on without my parents' support, I don't think. My girlfriend had caught me using that weekend. I think the biggest thing that happened, though, a guy at work, a manager at work, had come up to me and he said, my girlfriend goes to see psychics, and I went with her yesterday, and the psychic said, someone you know is going to go back to jail. And he said, you're the only one I've known who's ever gone to jail.
Has a chance.
So he said, you better watch it.
Wow.
And at that moment, the hair on my neck stood up.
I'm getting goosebumps.
Like I was like, oh man, you can fool everybody, but maybe you can't fool God or your higher self or the spiritual world. I could kind of blow off my parole officer and girlfriend and parents maybe, but I don't know, something stuck that day. And I went to a 12-step meeting and saw some people I knew, and they just kind of spoke my language, like when people spoke and they read and things like that. I related to it, and it was like refreshingly honest to be able to say I'm an addict, like I'm Jay, I'm an addict, and kind of like I need help. Although I didn't say that, obviously I was there to get help. And I know I committed to, what people had told me, and I did the 90 and 90 and things like that, suggestions I had heard. I was still smoking some non-habit forming herb and drinking, because that wasn't a problem, drinking alcohol. And that led me back after about 6 months of going to meetings to use my, kind of DOCs or drug of choice. And then I really realized, I think that's when I hit a different kind of a bottom, more of a spiritual bottom. Like, I can't do this. And my mentor at the time said, well, you've tried it your way, why don't you try it our way? And I did. He said, try it for 30 days. Just no, non-habit forming herb, and no, fooling around with, double gin and tonics at lunchtime, washing down Sudafed or something, falling off the sidewalk. And I did that in that 30 days. I said, I'll use it 30 days. Then it was 31, 32, 33 days. And I remember sitting back thinking, how is this working? Like, I could never do this before. I couldn't do it on my own. I couldn't do it with psychiatric help. I couldn't do it in psych units. I couldn't do it through the government vacation when, different agencies would come in and talk to us and things like that. I always thought I must be so sick that I need a team of crack psychiatrists following me around all day, figuring out why I'm so messed up. Because I generally like a good-natured kind of guy. It wasn't like criminally minded or anything. Like, it wasn't like, I'm going to break into your house and steal your stuff. Drug smuggling and selling drugs just came easy, like you said about your podcast. It's just something you knew, and it came easy. And I think, through recovery, I found the person that I was before I got into the drugs, the person maybe God or my higher self meant me to be. And that felt good. Like, it felt good to be honest. It felt good to be authentic. It felt good to look at a future, I think, because I just lived one day at a time in the moment. And I think, they say pot steals your dreams. You don't dream at night when you smoke weed. And I think for the first time in a long time, I started to have some aspirations and some goals and some, dream about things that I would do one day. And it felt good, to not tell lies, not play that 007 like, oh, I work as a salesman for, selling Apple computers on one side, and on the other side, I'm dealing heroin. It felt like, now, it was congruent. I could be the person that, if I said I'm going to do something, I did it. Like, I had some integrity about me. Yeah, so I think that's where I was. That was like 30 odd years ago. I started to work helplines and help other people, and I just found I liked it. I'm a kind of a personable person. I went back to school for counseling. I worked for Ontario Hydro at the time, doing workshops, and they sent me to McMaster, and I went to George Brown and became a counselor. And I guess more recently, I started the recovery houses about, not recently, but about 15 odd years ago. I found that there was a hole in the market between public sober houses and private. There were no private sober houses in Toronto at the time. And a buddy of mine, his name's Eerie, he's actually my boss now over at Jack's Toronto. Can I say that?
Yeah,
Jack's
yeah,
Toronto?
please,
Yeah, I
yeah.
work for Jack's Toronto as well.
Please.
And I'll plug them a little bit.
Yeah,
Great
yeah.
agency. If you need counseling, just give them a call.
Yeah.
Great therapists. But he had asked me, he said, recovery's kind of boring. And I said, yeah, you got to be like a certain kind of person to have fun in recovery. You got to be kind of a fun person, like
A little bit crazy.
Yeah, like you keep that kind of zany, kind of like, spontaneity. Maybe it's a bit of an immature side to us.
Yeah, totally.
You want to keep that and get rid of the darker side. And he said to me, I go to meetings, I do a little dating, I go out with people once in a while, but for the most time, I just go home and, it's kind of, I go to work. And he said, why don't you open up a sober house? So I said, yeah, that's an idea. And I just kind of thought about it, and I had 4 or 5 people in some of the government houses. And I talked to them and said, would you come into a sober house? I got somebody to kind of finance a little bit on a charity side of things. And, we opened one up, I guess about 17 years ago, and opened up. I liked it. It was kind of a hangout for people. We didn't have a lot of rules or anything back then. It's kind of the Wild West of sober houses. But everybody had a good time, did lots of activities, people just hung out. It was kind of a place to be when you were feeling alone.
Yeah.
Because, you have to kind of admit you're giving up. When you say give up drugs and alcohol, you're giving up friendships, you're giving up activities. Probably 16 hours out of my day was devoted to either thinking about drugs, getting drugs, using drugs, coming down from drugs, thinking about drugs again.
It's a full-time job.
Yeah.
Like full-time.
So you give that up and you got like 16 hours a day.
What do I do now?
Yeah. Exactly. So that's
amazing.
where I am today these days.
Amazing. And it's the recovery place, it's called. And
Yeah,
now
yeah.
you're up to 3 houses?
4.
4 houses.
Yeah, we have 4 houses.
Amazing.
Yeah. 1 main house, 3 step downs that for guys that don't need the structure of a 24-hour staffing house. Yeah.
Yeah, that's amazing. And, I want to say, like, you were a pivotal part, even today, a pivotal part of my recovery. We met 10 years ago in 2015. I was 23 years old, and, I'll never forget Dave, my buddy Dave S., right?
Yep.
Good old Dave S.
Yep.
He saved my life. One of the many people, you as well.
Yep.
But he said, and back then, and just like you said, I was at a point where, you know what, my ideas aren't working anymore.
Yeah.
My plans, my designs, my great ideas, they're getting me in hotel rooms by myself. They're getting me snorting coke, and I'm feeling good, but I want to feel better.
Right.
Oh, and I just didn't get it. It didn't make sense. I was like, why can't I stop, right? Why do I, my dad always used to say this, and I always say it. It's like, Anthony, all you care about is the next party. And it's true. That's all I cared about. I didn't care about relationships. I didn't care about job. I just wanted the next party.
Yeah.
And when everyone was going home, I was like, what the fuck is wrong with you guys? Like, why are we stopping? Let's keep going, right? So we met 10 years ago, and Dave asked, my buddy Dave, he says, you know what? I recommend you go into the sober house when you get back home from Minnesota, because I was in a residential treatment center in Hazelden in Minnesota. And I said, you know what? Fuck it. I battled with it, and I said, fine, I'll do it. And it ended up being one of the best experiences of my life. And, this time around, I came back, after I relapsed. Same thing. My buddy Dave, a different Dave now, Dave R. at the other treatment center that I went to. We recommend that you do 60 days and you go to another sober house.
Yeah.
And, I wanted to ask you this too, is like, why is it that maybe I don't think it's just me, but why are we so defiant? Why, when someone tells us to do something, the first idea in my head is like, go fuck yourself. I know what's best for me. Why
Yeah.
do you think addicts are so defiant?
I think it's control. Drugs are control. It's a way of controlling our feelings, our moods. When somebody tells, I think human nature is just, when you go to feed a baby, as soon as the baby can, it'll hit the spoon out of your hand and it'll try and pick it up and shove it in its mouth.
Yeah.
I think, human nature is such that we want to exert our independence. We want to be self-sufficient in some way. So when somebody suggests something that, even though it might be good for us, we only see the short term. Well, they're trying to control me. They're taking away my freedom. And, the recovery house is like a halfway house. It's going to be like a correctional facility. I'll lose all my
Rights.
all my rights. I just came to treatment to find freedom from addiction. And here I am, going back into a place that's going to control me. And the reality is we just provide the structure, for people to develop healthier lifestyles. What they learned in treatment, just carry it forward, right? So I think once somebody comes to a recovery house, they realize, wow, this is, I'm in the brotherhood, I'm, with like-minded peers, we'll say.
Yeah. And I mean, that I definitely realized that when I got there. I learned how to have fun in recovery. And another pillar in my recovery, Colson, you remember Colson?
Yeah,
he was
course.
a counselor.
Yeah.
He, at your recovery house, he took me to my first club sober.
Yeah.
And I was able to go to a club, which I love to do. I love to dance. I love to.
Yeah.
And I went with him and I was scared shitless. I remember that. I'll never forget that feeling in my gut. I'm doing something that feels a little bit wrong.
Yeah.
And I don't have my medicine to like socialize and to, everyone's looking at me and, all this. It's all bullshit. No one cares. Nobody cares whether you drink or not. I found that out today, right?
Yeah.
I found that if somebody has a problem with you not drinking, it's probably because they have a problem themselves.
It's their problem. Right?
Yeah. What other people think of me is none of my business, right? One of my favorite quotes.
Yeah.
But I learned how to have fun at the recovery place. Like, and I truly mean that. And today I look back and like, that was a moment that I'll never forget. Right. But you said brotherhood, hanging out and, seeing people that were going through recovery and having fun and like-minded and, going to meetings and doing all these things together. It's just like this camaraderie that you can't get out here. You know what I mean? So I was reading a study on your website. I don't know if you'll remember this, but it said something like, you recommend a 3-month stay, usually after a treatment center or without it. But why do you think that 3 months is the percentages were way higher than from a study from someone that stayed 3 months to someone that didn't stay 3 months? Why do you think that is?
I think it's somebody who doesn't go, right? We'll compare it to somebody who doesn't go at all. Yeah. And we kind of know that 3 months, 90 days, I don't know if it's scientifically proven or not, but the neurochemistry takes time to change. Our neurons, takes a little bit of time. If I talk about cocaine long enough, you're going to start salivating,
totally.
Pavlov's dog kind of thing, right? If I talk about, I don't know, the keg steak, they're amazing strip loins or something. You get that smile on your face. I'm just picturing it right now.
Warms my heart. Yeah.
It targets our, our memory goes to our pleasure center. Yeah. Our pleasure center solicits some chemical response, and we enjoy that, right? So in 90 days, I think the first 30 days, what we see is somebody's, kind of on their best behavior. They've got that spiritual bank account. They've gone through a 30, 60, 90-day treatment center. People have been saying, oh, my God, I can't believe what you shared today. I relate to it so much. That was amazing. You start working out, you start eating better, you start talking to people about more real life adventures, we'll say, or reality. And it's stimulating. It's nice to see the world through new eyes. Sometimes they call it a pink cloud. We're not seeing the problems in treatment because we're kind of in that bubble.
Yep, the bubble.
So they get out. They've got that 50,000 spiritual dollars in their bank account. They go to a couple of meetings. They get $50, $100. They give their number to somebody. They get a number. They get $100. But in the same token, they drive down a familiar street where they used to score. They talk to somebody they used to score with. Those withdrawals are like 5,000 dollar withdrawals because it's familiar. It's something we know. going to a meeting where you don't know people, asking for a phone number from a stranger is difficult. So it's not a huge, it's not like doing 100 reps of weights that you would normally do, kind of thing. So it takes more, and that's where the recovery houses come in. They talk about going to different fellowships or different places, aftercare programs, and things like that to get some blockers, to get some strength going, to put in those deposits. So about 60 days or so, we start to see some of the cracks start forming in people, where people are saying, well, I think I could have some near beer, or I can smoke some non-habit forming herb because that wasn't my problem. Or maybe somebody who drinks says, I could do something else, and somebody who smokes weed says I can drink, because those weren't my problems.
Right.
But we know bags and bottles, it's all the same when it gets down to it. It's all about controlling our feelings, having control over ourselves. And if we're using bags and bottles to do that, we're not cultivating our authentic self, we'll say, right? We're looking for something outside of myself that's going to give me the feeling that I want my natural chemistry to start to solicit, right? Facing new challenges, going to a meeting where you don't know people, facing adversity, being in the uncomfortable, and getting through it. So when people get through, that's when we start seeing the cracks. People, maybe they want to hang out with their old friends, and although they may not have drug alcohol problems, it triggers them and they go back to where they were. So I guess what I'm kind of saying is that 90 days, in that 60 to 90 day period, we can see where the cracks have formed and try and, bridge that gap for people, whatever that is. Because we're an abstinent-based program. We're not going to turn to somebody and say, well, you did heroin, so here's a couple of joints and wash it, and we know you'll get dry, so, here's some Jack Daniels.
But at least you're not doing heroin.
Yeah, exactly. So we're not on really a harm reduction in the sober house. In counseling, I do. I use more of a harm reduction approach because people don't want to stop. Why stop something that they're enjoying? Problem is, it stops becoming enjoyment, and the problems start to mount, right? So that's why we say 90 days.
I love that. You made me think of something too. Is I had to learn that the hard way with and for me it was, things. And I always say this, but I crave chaos because the chaos distracts me from how I'm feeling, how I'm feeling about myself, how I'm feeling in the world. So, when I relapsed this last time, my life was ordinarily amazing, but it was ordinary, right? And there was no excitement. And what I've learned now is that in those moments, sometimes you just got to white knuckle it and call somebody and call a mentor, like you said, and get through it, because you never feel the same the next day. There's so many times where I even just recently, I've been like, you know what? I need to talk about this for one, because it kind of halves the problem. It takes the power away. And two, I just need to get to bed tonight. Yeah. And then the next morning I wake up, I'm like, oh, fuck, I can't believe I was thinking about Coke. I can't believe it. I was thinking about beer or whatever. Yeah. And so I relapsed this last time because I had this ADHD problem in my head. And I'm like, I'm going to fix it. I'm going to get some Vyvanse. I'm going to, get a prescription. I'm going to do it properly. And just like you said, I was back doing the Coke, back doing the meth. And within a matter of, in a year, because I had built up so much recovery before that. But then the next time it happened a lot faster and it got a lot worse. And I was hanging out with people I shouldn't be hanging out with again. Right. And to your point now, it's like the risk reward for it, trying the near beer, like you said. I've been hearing a lot about this actually on social media, where there's this guy that I follow that he drinks near beers, and there was a whole debate in the comments section. And I love that I can just look at that and be like, you know what? I don't even want to go down that path anymore. It might seem so insignificant today, this 0% beer, but what's my motive behind it? Am I trying to steal some vicarious pleasure at the bar, or am I really just trying to hide that I don't fit in feeling? So I'm going to drink this near beer, and now I fit in, right? And that's what it is usually.
Yeah, very true. Right? Yeah.
Usually good it's I want to fit in, and I don't want people to look at me. And then, so to your point, I'm using a crutch now, and then in no time I'm back where I started. But it starts with something small always.
I think everybody's different. Yeah. There's so many roads up the mountain.
Yeah.
for one person, drinking a near beer takes that edge off where
Yeah.
they're not going to go and get a real beer, which might lead to something else. If they could hold it at that near beer, all the power to them.
Absolutely.
If, a heroin addict who's using needles, his first step is, I'm going to give up the needles, right? That's amazing. If you got to smoke a joint to get through that heroin craving, go for it, Eventually, hopefully, they'll find that they're going to put themselves at even lower risk for problems, for health concerns, right? By giving up more and more, or letting go of more of their drugs and alcohol behavior. Yeah.
I remember when I first, when I came back the second time, you told me when I was there 10 years ago and I left, you thought that I wasn't going to stay sober after that. And I found that, like, I had no idea, right? So my question to you is, and I've always wondered this, when people come in to your sober house, do you know whether they're going to make it or not? Or what's your kind of thought around that?
That's such an interesting question, because I worked at Humber Hospital, their outpatient program, for about 10 years. And you know what? I'd see guys that struggle and they're questioning everything. And I think, oh man, this guy's going to get out. He's not going to have a chance. Right. And I see people that they come in and they believe and they have faith and they walk on water and people are asking for their advice.
They're leading.
Yeah, they're the first guy out the door. They think they got it all, and they got it, they got things under so much control that they could use again, and not fall into the same pattern. And the guys that are struggling, the men and women that struggle, I think they're finding, where does this fit in my life? They're asking those questions because they really want to know if this jacket's going to fit when I leave here, And I think with you, I didn't have the strong conviction. I didn't feel your conviction for recovery. I wasn't getting it. And you listen, we're all human. But man, you went on a rip and a tear. You were one of the guys. If I send somebody somewhere, I say, hey, look for Anthony. And I knew that they were going to get the goods on recovery. It wasn't going to be, hey, let's go to the strip joint tonight and we'll pick up we'll pick up something on the way. They're going to get, like, hey, this is how you do recovery. You want to do it? This is how you do it. I think you had, like, what?
I had
6-7 years.
I had 7 years.
7 years.
I was
a long time, man.
It
You
was
grow up a lot during that
best
time.
years of my life, man.
Yeah.
Best years of my life, honestly. And I'm close to feeling like that again.
Yeah.
And it's funny because in treatment, my wife Rebecca, they were telling, she'd be telling the therapist, when am I going to get Anthony version 1.0 back?
Right.
Or when am I going to get the sober Anthony back?
Right.
And they would all say the same thing. It's like, you're not going to get 1.0.
You're
going to get
2.0.
you're going to get now 2.0.
You're going to get a better.
You might not like him. You might, you know what I mean? But he's going to be different because experiences have changed. I've banged my head a few more times. I've scraped my knee a few more times. And I found a new, spirituality again, where it involves me waking up every morning and, I pray, but it's also too, I also remind myself every morning now that I'm an alcoholic, I'm an addict, and, I can't control the way I feel with outside substances without going on some, tear, right? And it involves that. How do you stay sober today? What are some key things in your life, that help you?
That's a good question. I think about that once in a while. Like, why me? Why am I, blessed that I don't have, like, huge cravings and, I have cravings for other things. I think addiction is fluid.
Totally.
Like food has become, my relapse. I'm kind of a food porn addict. I look in the fridge. What's going on? Is there new Netflix playing in there today? Did I get new food? And,
you're expecting it to just show up. I do that all the time.
So I call it food porn. Because it's exciting. There's an excitement to.
It's a novelty, right?
Yeah, it's it's a bad habit, I can say. That I'm constantly trying to work on. Sometimes I have more success than other times. I think, at some point, I just lost that desire to use. It wasn't, I turned the corner, maybe it was a year, 2, 3 years. And I just thought my life is, I'm blessed. I've met great people in my life. I was blessed with children. I was able to be the son that my parents wanted me to be. My sister, who I tormented during my drug use days, came back into my life in a much more, for me anyway, a much more positive relationship. I guess I found the depths of my relationships, the quality of them, were so much better. Meeting people like yourself, it's helping people who are struggling, and then watching them turn the corner where they lose that desire. Yeah. So for me, I guess, I have, a Gorski model of recovery was relapse prevention planning. These are the 32 signs of relapse. And when I first read them, I thought, man, I got like 30 of these signs of relapse, What's going on? But I think it came down to a different viewpoint, which was more of a craving intervention plan. Living a more balanced lifestyle, getting out a little bit more, having some fun, balancing it with work. I came up with a philosophy for my life, which was number 1, help others. Number 2, have fun. And number 3, gain a reward. And when those 3 are in balance, there's a certain amount of focus on helping others. If I don't help enough people, I kind of get a little selfish, like I'm not there for others. If I help too many people, I kind of figure who's there for me.
Right.
And if I put that first, I'm out of self. I get out of myself. Like I'm not, want everything for me. I think having children helped me with that.
Yeah.
My son's going to get the bigger steak tonight, or one of my kids, that kind of thing. The other 2 were having fun. If I don't have enough fun, I'm like, what's life about?
What's the
If I have
point?
too much fun, people don't take me seriously. And gaining a reward and realizing that rewards aren't always monetary. Rewards come in watching you grow. Having a mother say to me, thank you for giving me my son back.
Oh, I love that.
Having my parents tell me how proud they are of me.
Yeah.
But I think it's balance and in the right order for me. But helping others, I think, is always, I think watching somebody, climb the mountain is, knowing that you had a hand in it is a beautiful, testimony to your life.
Yeah, totally.
Yeah.
I think, and one of the great things that you do, Jay, is, people relapse all the time, right? It's a huge part of, it doesn't have to be, but it's a part of recovery. It can be a part of recovery. And one of the great things that I admire about you is you give them a chance, you give them another chance, right? And I've seen you do it time and time again. And because you don't know when that person's going to figure it out, right? It might not be their time.
100%.
But I've seen you do it so many times. And that's kind of the key here is you don't turn your back on them just because they inconvenienced you or they made a mistake, because we were there at one point, right? What do you think the number one reason people go out is? People relapse, people fail in recovery. Like, what do you think?
I think it's multifaceted.
Yeah.
People aren't having a good time. They're not enjoying themselves. They haven't found meaning and purpose in their life. They haven't found a community that they're a part of. There might be mental health issues, depression, anxiety, possibly thought disorders. Could be finances, financial obligations that they can't meet, and the stressors are overwhelming for them. They just want to get a little bit of relief. Every time I relapsed on cigarettes, I just want to drag. I just want to drag. And I have to say to myself, well, you don't smoke cigarettes, so why do you want to drag?
Yeah.
And I say, what's the driver? What's the feeling under that drag? Because I know I'll have a drag and I'll be buying a carton within a week.
Same.
Then it'll be 4 or 5 years before I get another opportunity to quit, when I get that motivation and the stars align. So I think if we can ask ourselves, what's driving this bus today? Why do I want to use? right? We can probably come up with probably about 70% of the answer.
Yeah.
You know, like we say in recovery, I'm hungry, angry, lonely, tired, bored.
Yeah.
You know, if I can figure out, okay, I'm hungry, go eat something. I'm tired, go sleep.
Yeah.
I'm bored, go do something,
Yeah.
right?
And just get through it, right?
Yeah.
Get through it till tomorrow.
Yeah.
I love that. What do you think? So family is a big part of addiction.
Mm-hmm.
You know, family, we drag them through the mud a lot. What do you think the difference between kind of, and I get this question a lot from family, what's the difference between enabling and supporting an addict? You know, where's that line?
Yeah,
kind
that's a
of?
great point, because addiction, you know, just the very nature of somebody who's stuck in dependency issues, every cell in their body is geared towards getting what they want at all cost. And for a family member, 10% of their, psyche is geared towards, catching somebody. 90% is geared towards supporting somebody. You know, we want our kids to be, wonderful. We want them to be happy. We want them to be successful. We want our partners, our associates at work, our playmates. You know, we want success. That's the hallmark of life, I think, is to be successful, whatever that means. So I think, the difference is that, enabling is giving somebody the opportunities to continue that lifestyle against our better nature, against our thoughts that this is wrong.
I like that.
Right?
Yeah.
Where support looks more like, if you take a step forward, I'm going to take a step forward with you. You know, I can't be there pushing you forward. I can't be there pulling you forward. But when you make that decision that you want to make a life change, and that's in alignment with my morals and values, right? I can support that.
I'm going to be there with
Yeah.
you. Yeah.
Yeah.
I love that. Wow. I've never heard anyone say it like that. That's nice. Yeah. Because I think a lot of people struggle with that, right?
Sure. I do.
Yeah.
You know, what's enabling in the recovery house? How many chances do you give somebody before you say, well, the recovery house isn't helping? You know, they're just, eroding. You know, they're unhappy. And, refer them somewhere else. Get a different kind of help for them. Look at the opportunities that are out there, the resources, and figure it out.
Yeah.
And I think that's one of the things that some, it's always be reinventing ourselves, at the recovery place or treatment centers. What can we introduce that's new, different, exciting, adventurous, that'll help somebody move them forward, right? Yeah.
Yeah, I like
There's
that.
always new advances in addiction, I think. Yeah.
So the addict, alcoholic, person struggling with mental health right now, that comes into your house is shaking, or even you see them on the street, on the street. What do you say to that person?
Usually, interesting. I never ask somebody if they're using. If I see somebody who I knew in the past, I never ask them. I just say, "How you making out these days?" And if they don't hear judgment and opinion in your voice, they might tell you. And then you can open it up to, wow, it sounds tough, or anything I can help you with. Is there something that I can support you around? Because I think for me, that judgment, I was judging myself. I was so ashamed of where I'd gotten myself that it was so hard to ask for help, because that admitting defeat, and then not knowing if the help's going to be there. Are they going to ridicule you, or are they going to, look down on you? So I think I try to, treat people with kindness and respect. Sometimes I lose it, and that's also part of my humorous side, I think, too.
I love it.
I have a dark sense of humor that comes out at times. Somebody tells you something, you just got to shake your head. Are you actually telling me this? You sat on a bag of cocaine on the TTC? Really? And that's why you're positive for coke? Like, really, that's what you're saying to me? Okay, if it's important for me to believe it, I'll believe it. Although you're shaking your head and your brow is furrowed. But I think giving people opportunity until you burn out, and you got to admit, at some point we're going to get burnt out. And we've tried to help somebody so often that maybe it has become enabling, and we don't see it. That's why I love the staff in my house. They say, Jay, what are you doing? Like, this guy doesn't need us. He's got his own adventures to live that don't call for sobriety. So you got to let it go.
Yeah.
And I do,
Yeah.
But it's tough.
But it's
tough. You got a heart for people.
Yeah, totally.
Yeah.
And it's listening to those people sometimes where you're like, you're seeing it from a different perspective, right?
Dave S has said that many times to me. Got to let go. Yeah.
I love it. Okay, well, thanks, Jay. You know what? I had a great time. I love you so much, buddy.
No,
Thanks for coming
too,
down.
Yeah.
I look forward to our many more. Hopefully you can have you on again with Caleb. And
that'd be fun.
I really appreciate it. But I got a lot out of this. So
thanks,
thank
Anthony. Yeah, thanks for having me down.
Thanks for listening. Please help us grow the channel and like, share, and subscribe for more content. The discussions and stories shared on this podcast are for informational and motivational purposes only. This content is not a substitute for professional medical advice, addiction treatment, or therapy. If you or someone you know is struggling with addiction, please consult a licensed physician, addiction specialist, or mental health professional. You are no longer alone.